Welcome to Inside Sponsorship, the show that provides sponsorship professionals with advice, insights and news so they can maximise their commercial programs and achieve best practice.
How many of you who rely so heavily on traditional inventory, things such as signage, uniform branding, home game activations, tickets and hospitality, would struggle if you could no longer offer them to your sponsors? What about if you are at a rights holder who enjoys long and regular periods of sustained awareness and engagement, like an annual 20-plus week season? Would your job be tougher if you couldn't rely on that high-profile regularity? How would you even approach your job without those things? It's an interesting hypothetical for most of you, but a reality for those like Ian Sargeant and Paralympics New Zealand. Welcome to episode 54 of Inside Sponsorship. I'm your host, Daniel Oyston, and as always, it's great to know that there are so many people out there all over the world at all levels and at rights holders, brands and agencies who tune into the show. It's especially awesome when we hear from some of those listeners so we can give them a shout out, but alas, I haven't heard from anyone since the last show. So please, I feel lonely and we need validation. So get in contact through sponserve.net or LinkedIn. Just drop us a line and say hi and let us know where you work. I will, however, give a public thanks and a shout out to Hugh Rogan, Strategic Partnerships Manager at IMG, based in Melbourne, Australia. Hugh has had a shout out in the past, but on this occasion, I had a contact who asked if I knew anyone at IMG in Sydney who might be willing to have a coffee and chat about careers. And so I reached out to Hugh and he didn't hesitate in helping to make an introduction to the right person. Great job, Hugh. Very much appreciated. You're a legend. In 1944, at the request of the British government, Dr. Ludwig Guttmann opened a spinal injuries centre at the Stoke Mandeville Hospital in Great Britain, and in time, rehabilitation sport evolved to recreational sport and then to competitive sport. On the 29th of July 1948, the day of the opening ceremony of the London 48 Olympic Games, Dr. Guttmann organised the first competition for wheelchair athletes, which he named the Stoke Mandeville Games, a milestone in Paralympics history. They involved 16 injured servicemen and women who took part in archery. In 1952, Dutch ex-servicemen joined the movement and the International Stoke Mandeville Games were founded. Now, these games later became the Paralympic Games that we know today, and they first took place in Rome in 1960, featuring 400 athletes from 23 countries, and since then, they've taken place every 4 years. In 1976, the first Winter Games in Paralympics history were held in Sweden, and as with the Summer Games, have also taken place every 4 years. As I said at the top of the show, organisations like Paralympics New Zealand don't boast a plethora of traditional benefits, nor can they rely on long and regular seasons. But that doesn't matter to Ian Sargeant, Commercial Manager at Paralympics New Zealand, and in fact, when he joins us later on in the show, he outlines how he believes it actually makes them and helps them do better work. But first, our MD, Mark Thompson, joins us on the show to discuss a very interesting topic and not one that is talked about a lot, and that is the sponsorship landscape in terms of understanding third-party influencers who could be vital to success. Here's Mark. Mark Thompson, welcome back for another episode.
Hey, mate.
How are you?
I'm well.
Now, the topic today is about understanding the sponsorship landscape, and in my preparation, I didn't know what to ask because you've got the people that want to get sponsored and you've got the brands doing the sponsoring. That's about it. Thanks for joining us.
No worries. And you are the typical outside-in vision of sponsorship.
For the good of the show, I had to lead with my chin. So yes. We are going to talk about the wider sponsorship landscape, aren't we?
Yeah, mate. I mean, from the outside in, it does look pretty simple. And really, only those that are at the coalface, that have got their hands dirty and worked in it. There's some people within an organisation that think it's that simple. There's board members that think it's that simple. There's all sorts of people.
Not the ones that listen to this podcast, though.
You know, people think that rights holders just go out, they meet with companies, they pitch them, deals are negotiated, they're done, and everyone moves forward, cash goes in the bank, and then in the off-season, people sit there with their feet up waiting for next year to roll around.
The only way that would be more a fairy tale if it started with once upon a time and finished they lived happily ever after, because it's not the case, is it?
No, well, hopefully if you are doing your job right, happily ever after is the ending, but yeah, not once upon a time, because it's actually an evolved thing. So once upon a time, it was like that.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we are going to look at the wider sponsorship landscape, but specifically those third parties. So not just focusing on the rights holders and the brands who are doing the sponsoring. We're going to look at the third parties who influence, enable, maybe sometimes even hinder the relationships there. Yeah. Let's walk through them. Who are they?
Look, mate, and there's heaps of ways of breaking this down. So I've just simplified it as far as I can for the audience, just to knock it out in within 24 hours. But from all the people we work with at SponServe, the one thing is becoming more and more evident to us. Wherever you are in the world, things are done differently. But it doesn't matter where you are. Those that do it really well, they actually have a really good understanding of their strengths, their weaknesses, and then they engage parties that have strengths in the areas of their weaknesses to make sure they're strong all over the place.
Which, to be fair, is pretty much how managers all over the world are taught to manage.
Correct, exactly right. And that's why, some people... I had a conversation with somebody recently who didn't want to use an agency to help sell a property because they didn't want to give up 20% commission. And I said to the guy, well, have you got any prospects? And he said no. And I said, well, how much would you pay to land a deal tomorrow versus the stress of 8 months down the track? And he said, oh, wow, I couldn't put a number on it. I said, well, you could put 20% on it, and there you go.
Yeah, or you could find somebody and not make as much as that agency might make more plus their 20%, and then everybody's a winner, right? Exactly right.
And there's lots of stuff that goes around it, but I've kind of broken it down to 4 third-party groups that sort of sit around the edges and sometimes right in the middle of sponsorship programs. There's some broad but easy to explain sort of groups here. So the first one are internal influencers. So, these are the people at your talent that are at your disposal, such as your athletes, if you're a rights holder, or an artist, if you're in the entertainment industry, or, success stories in, the community or charitable organisations. But more importantly, they're also your board and your executive of your organisation. They're internal influencers that aren't sitting between the transaction of the brand and the rights holder. They sit around the edge to help the relationship.
And enabled the right way can really help you.
Well, they can help with introductions. They can help, the old board adage that I love and I always talk about is give, get, or get off. It works really well in not-for-profit and charitable organisations. It should play just as well into any other sort of board environment these days. And that's their role. But then your talent, they help tell stories. They help provide engaging and emotional content. And then, the second group of people are your agencies. And so agencies play a big role in sponsorship, both sides of the fence. They help find, they help keep, they help manage, they help sort of activate. But correctly utilising agencies and what they provide can literally be the difference in profit and loss or success and failure. Because some agencies are brilliant at what they do and you could not hire the talent that these guys can bring to the table.
Very good. So internal influencers, agencies.
I've broken this one out. It could fit into agencies, but I've called this speciality services. So, they can come from within or outside of your organisation, and that's why I broke it out, because what we're talking about is people that are vital to the success of your program, but they provide a special service like a graphic designer, a printer, a merchandiser, digital expertise, things like that are nowadays we're seeing more and more of inside an organisation. But they're a special service that are required to make the partnership sing. That sit around the outside.
And it's not always... Sometimes you'll be lucky and a brand will have those specialty services internal themselves. Oh, we've got a graphic design or a marketing department that can help with collateral, or they've already got relationships in place. But you shouldn't assume that, because when it comes time to activation, if they don't, you're just going to be on the back foot, right?
That's right. But people have access to people. That's why they're part of the whole landscape.
Is the next one your favourite one?
Yeah, well, it's the newest, my favourite. For obvious reasons, but technology. So It's new to the space, but technology is now established as something that rights holders and brands can't do without if they want to see success over all their internal functions, and in fact sometimes they're external now as well. And those that are leading in best practice sponsorship and making the most of technology to work together through the whole process from start to finish, to deliver return on investment, to deliver return on objectives, to track, to measure those, to report on them, but also to communicate and basically protect the organisations against knowledge loss from staff turnover and all those types of things that sit around the edge and are negatives when things change in a person-to-person relationship.
So it's a good intro to those 4 third parties, internal influencers, agencies, specialty services and technologies. How about we talk about what each one may specifically bring to the table so that the listeners get a little bit of an understanding of whether, I should go and look at that area more, or no, I think I'm okay there.
Well, generally I'm on a pretty strict time limit with this show with you, so we won't go
somewhere better to be.
No, we won't go deeper than we have to for the time on this. But even on the surface, there's heaps of things that need to be understood within those 4 groups. What roles they do and can play for an organisation. So, number 1, what was it again?
Internal influencers.
So, the talent they provide the engagement, they provide the faces to drive the emotional attachment. They're also, can be vital in providing asset availability, which are sold, such as appearance time or
just sponsoring that player. We see that, don't we?
Yeah, use of IP, mate. That's most of the time the IP involves a collective of athletes in a sporting context. Your board and executives' role is to unequivocally support the commercial goals, targets and activity in any way they can add value. So that is give, that is get, that is advise, that's support. And one of the key functions of the board is to support the operational practice rather than to dictate it. So for me, what I said before, that give, get or get off rings true when you think about it in that way, because the skills that a board member brings, if in a supportive role, can be stronger than in a dictatorial role for a sponsorship program.
Yeah, it's stronger because it makes the employee feel empowered and supported and enabled to go and do their job bigger and better rather than just being reactive to what a board member is telling them to do.
Exactly right.
All right, number 2, agencies.
So
this is going to be a big one.
Mate, I've somehow broken it down to 5 different bullet points, but there's many types of agencies. Some offer a broad range of services, and it depends where you are in the world. So here in Australia, we find a lot of our agencies are multi-purpose agencies. They're full service. They try and provide, your activation, your sales, your sort of engagement,
the management
even as well, valuation as well. They kind of try and be in that one thing. That's because of the landmass of Australia. That's because of the size of our sporting landscape versus the commercial landscape.
The she'll be right attitude. We'll sort it out.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody else can do it. But then when you move into other territories around the world that Sponsors operates in, we've found that one of the big things we learned when moving our business out of Australia into especially the UK is the different roles that different agencies play, and they actually support each other to create a really strong ecosystem, and that's something I think we can learn down here. But the first one is a sales agency. So they help you find partners, and more often now they actually work with specific industries or brands to source opportunities. So, we've got some close friends of our organisation that actually have brands they work for, and the brand will come out going, okay, we want a new property. They go find that property. They negotiate the sale, but they also do try and find opportunities that are out there with new brands that they don't work with and try and sell. But that's it. That's the start and finish of their relationship, is that opportunity, understanding the opportunity, understanding what the objectives of the brand are, doing the deal and walking away. Then the next one is the activation agency. So these people help, mostly they work with brands. If you're a large events-based business or you run huge game days, you will have an activation agency as a rights owner as well, and they help to activate partnerships in line with those set objectives. Very important to realising value, especially on the ROO side of the fence. We have event agencies, so these people are often the ones responsible for putting together, executing entire events or specific pieces of content at events. So think so even somebody like IMG, right, have a huge business. All of these different functions within their business are broken down into separate businesses. They're not actually separate divisions. They're actually separate businesses. And so, their event business is a different business to their, athlete management business, and so on and so forth. The next one is, something that you've got a lot more experience in than me, is the marketing agency. So that we're working on both sides of the fence. They're helping with creative, brand elements, positioning, marketing.
How it fits into maybe a brand's wider marketing.
Exactly right.
Yep.
But, they're the storytelling people as well. The activation guys tell stories, but these guys are the core of the storytelling, along with the next group that we talk about. But these guys are talking about membership programs. If you're a rights owner, they're talking about, how to use sponsorship as a strategy if you're a brand, those types of things.
And not completely divorced from activation agencies, but really trying to focus on that emotion and, like you said, memberships and being part of the brand and trying to tie that together with the brand that's sponsoring and the rights holders brand and trying to take people on that journey, not just at one activation at a game, but over the length of the contract.
Yeah, and they will cross over into that activation and sponsorship selection as well, these guys, because they're working more closely with the brands. And then you got your PR. Now, I think PR agencies, so working on the brand side, positioning the brand element, PR agencies are an important sideline that can help drive promotion of achievements in sponsorship. Massively underutilized by rights holders, though, I think. So, rights holders should be positioning themselves in, business press and all sorts of areas that actually endear them to potential opportunities down the line and people to understand who they are and what they bring outside of what you just see on the television.
And because PR agencies quite often tell stories, and that ties into the emotion. People love the stories about what people are doing and the journey they're going on and the challenges and then the triumphs. So PR agencies play a huge role.
Yeah, exactly right. But also, when you're taking out, what we spoke about on the last episode around the opportunity to sell on emotions not there, and you've got to sell on facts, PR agencies will have a backlog of different opportunities they've pushed into the market, not just about your performance and your growth and your success stories, but also about the core business that sits underneath that and why it's a solid platform, because that safety is what's actually going to help influence decisions.
Good point. So internal influencers, I'll list as long as our arm of agencies, different types of agencies, specialty services.
Yeah.
This is going to be long too, Sean.
It is. It's and because
where do you draw the line?
There is no line.
A cleaner.
It's a mixed group of people, right? So we'll bundle a few up, right? Well, let's just get to 3 bullet points. So the first one I had is strategic consultants. That's about as broad as you can get, right? But helping both sides of the fence with their sponsorship strategy. So it's a broad term to fit the broad category. Yeah,
and that's okay, I think, because sometimes people need help from consultants or specialty services, and they're not 100% sure what they need help with. I've been in more meetings than I could possibly count where people are saying, well, we think we want to do this, and then half an hour, 45 minutes later, you've unpacked what they're actually trying to achieve, and you've said to them, well, have you considered doing X, Y, Z to achieve that? Now, oh yeah, but if you know that you want social or branding or some specialty service like that, then you can go straight to that person. But if you're not sure, go and have a conversation with a more broad strategic consultant and let them guide you. You don't have to work with them going forward, but let them guide you in that initial instance. And
also, mate, we're looking at this in a silo. In realistic terms, you're going to be looking at this as part of your entire ecosystem, which is what this whole blog's about. You've got to piece it all together and think about it in other contexts of who else is involved in the environment, and that leads us to the digital consultants as well. So very important current day to provide strategy, execution and measurement, which are currently the buzz thing. Arguably the most attractive and vital elements of a sponsorship recap and review is when a sponsor is assessing the effectiveness of a partnership is the success of the digital elements of that partnership nowadays. So, large organisations will have a quasi-internal agency that play this role. Some of the really big sporting organisations out there will have their internal people that play this for the brands as well. whereas others will be, specialists in this area. And we're talking about, people, and actually more and more those internal agencies are kind of coming and going already. And so think of those the guys we work with down here in Australia, Green Room Digital, excellent at what they do, very hands-on, very consultative, but they deliver and they get it right. And it's really important to understand how to get it right in that space. And they're actually now operating out of the UK as well, which is exciting for them. And then the third one is your measurement services. So these are something that we find very important and valuable given what we do within SponServe. But measurement, it can be done by yourself. We've seen some different individuals out there that help talk through people through that. But when operating in larger markets, you need to be able to benchmark yourself against competition and other markets that your sponsors are active in. So, measurement services, especially the big guys, Nielsen Sports, Kantar, those people, the only way of getting large-scale benchmark reporting and using quantifiable currency is to be able to compare against large data sets. That's it. There's
a sample size of one is always very dangerous.
Sample size of one, or a sample size of one sport, or a sample size of one territory, it's still, you're just comparing.
Or one relationship in a rights holder.
You know what, if we were to benchmark the success of Daniel Oyston's podcast hosting against the previous hosts of Inside Sponsorship podcasts, the benchmark is just comparing you versus yourself, right? Of course you're going to get better over time.
Do I win still?
Well, at the moment you're getting better over time. Under review though. But, but portions of the roles are commonly played within the organisations themselves anyway, because you can measure whatever you want to measure, but you've actually got to measure meaningful, target-oriented things.
And the other thing is too, measurement services are, maybe 5-10 years ago, only the top guys really had access to it, could afford it. Now more people seem to have access to it. So if you haven't moved down that path, or you've been putting it off for a while, consider that the other partners of your brands are potentially providing this information, which allows the brands to make a more informed decision about whether there is return on investment and whether they should renew.
Well, and also what it's doing is it's helping make sense of data for sales and partnerships teams around selling factual information and reporting on factual information rather than it felt good. And that's a really good segue, because undoubtedly those services will be moving into point number 4.
Back to your favourite topic?
Technologies.
Woo.
So the emergence of specialised technologies for sport is never ending, and it can become a minefield. So, you've got CRMs, you've got ticketing and membership programs, you've got fan engagement, staff engagement and happiness, customised apparel.
Online stores.
Customer success. And for me, the most important, obviously, is the specialised sponsorship management technology. Mate, if you're sitting in a seat as a commercial director or somebody and all these things are coming at you, like, where do you start? Do you draw a line to say nobody? Do you only go through referrals? How do you procure it? There's a couple of things that kind of sit underneath that, but rather than looking at what each can provide you, we're going to sort of start to look around what is important in how to choose the right technology, because there's so many different technologies out there that we could talk here for an hour, right? But the most important point when technology selection is that you must have a pain point that can or is being solved by the technology. So if you've got a fantastic fan engagement program that runs and people engage with and your fans are interacting with, and there's no dip in engagement and it's actually growing, that's not painful.
It doesn't sound painful to me.
It doesn't sound painful unless you've got the budget and all the other areas are solved, and that's the one thing that hasn't adopted some technology to get better. That's a different kettle of fish. But you've got to be solving a pain point, and it's important to mention that finding a technology that's the best of breed across all features within one platform is just not possible, because people are going to specialise in one area.
People have been trying to create systems that fix everything since the first computer was ever made, and it just doesn't happen.
Well, I call that a unicorn, right? But it looks pretty, but it's not going to happen because people are going to be.
You keep looking for it, you're not going to find one.
Well, they're going to be specialists at one thing they do, and then anything they do outside of that one thing is going to kind of be subpar, right? So instead of looking at stuff like that, look at specifically designed and developed, and that can interact and engage within your existing platforms to help have a sort of seamless application within your business, but also provide the upside.
But I think the listeners need to be mindful too that there are certain areas of technology that will say things like, yes, buy us, and then when it's in there, we'll be able to make it do this. I don't think I've ever seen that work well. No,
well, some providers will lead you in the wrong direction. So
deliberately,
for self prophecy,
okay,
right?
Yep.
So it's not deliberate. It's almost through a lack of understanding and knowledge of that pain point that they're looking to solve,
or what else is out there in the market.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's look at it as from a sponsorship vision, right? If there's lots of people out there and other platforms that say, we can manage sponsorship, but they don't understand what we've just run through in this podcast of what actually goes into managing sponsorship and delivering success and reporting on success, like in the last episode, to be able to provide a meaningful service and technology. So, you've pretty much got to find something that fits for your own ecosystem and not listen to the others, but actually get an understanding yourself of what's happening. And at the end of the day, adopting it's going to be unavoidable. But if you go down the path of working with category experts, so people that are, experts in ticketing, experts in fan engagement, experts in staff engagement and happiness.
Yep.
Nowadays, there's so many different applications that can all work together and fit together through integrations. It's going to be much more beneficial for your business than trying to find an end-to-end one-size-fits-all
and all those programs that integrate with the APIs and talk to each other and all that sort of stuff can be way more nimble and focused on developing their area rather than parts of a larger system that aren't quite right, just sort of being left in the corner to fester and never really solving your problem.
But most of us out there already have pre-built APIs anyway, so you can. It's not that big a deal to plug it in. So.
Excellent. So understanding all of that now, how's that set us up for the future? What's it look like?
Look, I mean, people are all looking for speed of, work and decision-making success. They don't want to make the wrong calls. So I think the future lays with a mixture of inbuilt specialist staff internal to your organisation, selecting and using the right technologies, and then importantly, growing the use of agencies. I see the use of agencies increasing as, especially these specialised agencies that are bringing cool technologies to the table, the insights they're going to bring, the trends they're going to be able to bring to you, feedback into you as a sponsorship specialist, as either a brand or a rights owner, to do really cool things in your job without you having to try and do things that aren't your special area as well. And then collaboration is going to be the key when looking at your third-party ecosystem. And while it's never really changed, it's actually never been that visible to the outside world. And the diversity of our space, the emergency of technology in particular, means that if you want success, then collaboration is probably the most important thing.
Very good. So if you want to read through that in detail, just head along to sponserve.net, head to the blog section. Probably a fantastic opportunity to read through the blog and get a good understanding there, and then have a look back through those headings and say, where could I improve? Where could I get some help? Where might I be lacking? Because it's a pretty comprehensive list, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. You going on a trip soon? Must be a week or so.
Sunday, yeah.
This week?
Yeah, this Sunday.
4 or 5 sleeps.
Off
right.
To,
tell the listeners where you're going so they can prepare for your arrival.
Yeah, well, in a short period of time, I'm just going to the States, just swinging by New York to see a couple of guys, our lawyers and things in America.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, that'll be a good trip. But then off to South by Southwest in Austin, which will be excellent. So every day getting the updates of the new attendees and speakers that are being announced and all the other fun, engaging opportunities.
Like going to bed early and drinking water and lots of exercise. Fantastic.
Well, plenty of exercise, definitely, because I assume that the demand for Uber and Lyft and all those taxis are going to be pretty high. So I'm assuming I'm going to be up for the 7-kilometre walk to and from the hotel every day.
And from America to, you going to England?
Nah, just back home and then back to the UK after Easter.
Very good. Yep. All right. Safe travels.
Cheers, mate.
In the introduction, I posed some hypothetical questions about how you would approach your job and how hard it would be if you could no longer offer some of those traditional benefits to your sponsors or rely on long periods of high visibility, such as long annual seasons. While they are interesting hypothetical questions for you, those situations are actually a reality for Ian Sargeant, Commercial Manager at Paralympics New Zealand, and you'll learn about how he and the organisation manage those types of situations and much, much more about their work as we go inside sponsorship at Paralympics New Zealand. Here's Ian. Ian Sargeant, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Daniel. Pleasure to be with you.
We always kick off with a few easy icebreaker questions. Well, they should be easy, just to help the audience get to know Ian a little bit better. Ian, if you could be anyone else in the world for a day, who would you be and why?
I rack my brains because I'm a keen sportsman and could name a whole number of idols that I'd always, as a kid, sort of wanted to be or dreamed that I might be one day. But I'm going to answer this quite specifically and say that I'd be Vincenzo Nibali on the 24th of July, 2014. And if you don't know, he's an Italian cyclist, and that date in 2014 was when he won stage 18 of the Tour de France that year. And it's significant to me because 4 days earlier, I completed the exact same stage in an event called the Étape du Tour, which was 145 kilometres in the Pyrenees, and truthfully the hardest thing I've ever done. It was an incredible challenge. It took me 8 hours and 15 minutes to scale the Col de Tourmalet and then the mountaintop finish that followed after that one. But 4 days later, Vincenzo Nibali did it in the race, won it cleanly, well ahead of anyone else, and did it in a time of 4 hours and 4 minutes. So to be him on that day, for a day, that would be pretty epic.
That's an outstanding answer and very specific with the exact date. I don't think we've ever had that before. Great answer. Ian, second icebreaker question is, what was your first ever job?
I had the usual kind of paper around mowing neighbours' lawns, that kind of stuff. But my first real job was at Rebel Sport, which is a sports retail store in New Zealand. I got a job as a retail assistant in the golf department when I was about 15 and did that part-time when I was at school and then additional hours in the summer holidays. But I think back and it was probably even at that stage for me, it was a desire to work in sport was why I'd gone for that role and had to, persist for quite a number of months to get it because it relied on, a vacancy coming up and there's been a new store that opened near where I lived. But once I found myself stacking golf shoes and, arranging the way that golf tees were displayed on a shelf, it began to challenge that working in sport kind of dream that I had. So yeah, it's maybe a little bit of a myth, but hey, I'm still doing it, so can't complain.
Very good. So the 2008 Winter Paralympics, at the time we record this, for those people that might be listening 6-12 months later, just found the podcast, the Winter Paralympics is about 2 weeks from kicking off. How's the excitement levels going in the office and around the team?
Yeah, it's exciting, Daniel. It's certainly building up very quickly, and it's come around quickly as well. From the Summer Games, which were for us Rio in September of 2016, to think we're now on the eve of another big event is pretty monumental. So, yeah, very excited. We've got a pretty small team going to represent New Zealand. It's just 3 Paralympians or para-athletes. We had another who was selected but had to withdraw through injury. But yeah, it's coming together, and they are very competent athletes that have all won medals previously or been on the podium at World Cups. So we've got some high hopes. We have a target of 2 medals for the Games, and we've got the Games team operation manager and the chef de mission. They actually leave tonight for Pyeongchang, so it's all getting real pretty quickly.
Outstanding. Fingers crossed for a few medals. Hopefully you get your targets 2. Hopefully you get 3, and hopefully they're evenly spread so everybody comes home with one. Ian, you started out at Rebel Sport, still working in sport. Talk us through your work history leading up to your role now at Paralympics New Zealand.
Sure. I mean, finished up school, went off down to Dunedin to Otago University, which is one of the leading institutions in New Zealand, and there I was studying sport and sport business essentially, but I got a part-time job there working as a sport and recreation assistant at the university sport facility, so the gym and recreation centre, and then had some summer work throughout that time there. When I finished up uni, I qualified myself as a ski instructor, so went over to the States and spent a winter skiing, trying to teach others how to do the same, and then came back to New Zealand and worked in the race and events team at Coronet Peak. So I guess the theme there was always a desire to explore different parts of sport, keep that as a rough or a loose context perhaps to what I was doing. But the reality for me as a 22, 23-year-old at that stage was that it really wasn't paying the bills. So from there, I got a job as a door-to-door salesman, selling a ventilation or heating system for residential houses, which was a complete shock and a really difficult experience at the time. But it was my first sales experience, and I learned an awful lot from it, and taught me a lot about what I was capable of, but also perseverance and persistence and the rewards that come with that. So after a year or so there, packed my bags and jumped on a plane to the UK, as many Kiwis do at that age, and ended up having 5.5 years, or almost 6 years in London, and the vast majority of that was at Wembley Stadium, working for IMG. So I know you've interviewed Stuart Ramsey in the past, who had a similar story about his start that he got with IMG there. But for me, it was much the same, and phenomenal to be able to leave New Zealand, go and work at a venue where I'd spent my childhood watching FA Cup finals broadcast from, before eventually calling time on London and moving back here to settle down with my now wife, the Kiwi that I met in London, another cliche, and getting the job with Paralympics New Zealand, which I'm sure we'll explore a bit more in a moment.
Well, we'll explore it right now. Your job title is pretty self-explanatory, and we are on the Inside Sponsorship podcast, so I won't get you to explain what you do, because I don't think that'll give the listeners much context. Instead, I'd love to know what you think is the best part of your job.
It's a great job, and I think that the part that I like the most, though, is it's the ability to make a difference and to really see the direct effect that has on our organisation and the opportunities and that are presented to the athletes that represent us, really. So in many ways, that's the upside perhaps of working in a small organisation where you don't have multiple layers of decision making and huge amounts of bureaucracy to deal with, but it's also a lot about the potential that really exists within Paralympics New Zealand for us as an organisation, for sponsors to attach to, and the subsequent effect that can really make on the athletes. With and my role and a lot of our partners and sponsors are very close to the athletes, and they can see the effect that their support has on them. So that's really cool, and not something I'd experienced previously.
You said that job working door-to-door selling taught you a lot about yourself and what you're capable of, and developed some perseverance. As you mentioned, you also worked in sales at IMG for about 5.5 years. Big company, massive venue, sales-focused role, and no doubt a fair bit of pressure around numbers and phone calls and closing deals. What are some key things that you learnt during that experience there at Wembley and IMG that you think holds you in good stead now?
Three ideas, Daniel, that stick out for me. You're right, there was a lot of pressure. There was a huge amount of scale to everything that we did, and there was a pretty relentless calendar of events that IMG were responsible for ensuring were maximised, and that we made hit our targets with and sold out wherever possible. So the three things I learned though were that big isn't always better. So the grass is always greener on the other side, and being at a huge venue like that, selling a premium product, IMG were responsible for the premium tickets and hospitality offerings in the stadium. And often the single biggest challenge for us was actually creating that sense of exclusivity. So conversely, as it sounds, you've got an iconic venue, pinnacle events. But if you've got 161 corporate boxes, 17,500 hospitality seats, then it can be quite difficult to make each one of those clients actually feel valued and appreciate that there's a good reason they paid a premium to be there. So I learned that you do have to don't always take things at first sight, and that in this case a big venue came with its own set of challenges that were to the envy of a lot of other places, but still something that was quite significant for us. The other part of it was that it's a big organisation, and I learned there the importance and really, I guess, how to do so, of communicating clearly and deliberately. And that boils down to the relationship that I held with the clients I was responsible for, ensuring that there was always a accurate, clear, concise message from us around upcoming opportunities and what that entailed, but also internally, and whenever we strove to improve the product offering, then being able to engage all the right stakeholders across that organisation and make sure that people understood the motive and the benefit to each thing. So that I certainly learnt that through working in a large organisation as IMG, but also within the context of Wembley Stadium and the FA group that are there. And secondly, the challenge which leads and I guess has formed what I like to consider my area of expertise, but that the retention of our clients who was key to the ongoing sustainability of that hospitality program, and hence we had to think strategically around the product offering, the relationship we built with each of those clients, but also creatively and continually strive to come up with new ways to do things better, and to ensure that the offering that we presented as a venue remained fresh and it wasn't just reliant on the content on the pitch or the music or anything else that was being attracted to the stadium, but that we're constantly innovating in terms of that experience our box holders had particularly.
So you're now at Paralympics New Zealand. How does Paralympics New Zealand verbalise its organisation's mission and focus, and then how do you take that and relate that focus into attracting new sponsors?
So our vision at Paralympics New Zealand is, Daniel, is all about excellence and equity through sport. And that's a pretty succinct but quite powerful statement, and it sort of flows into our mission, which revolves around leading teams to the Paralympic Games, excelling, so ensuring there's the programs and systems in place to support our para-athletes to win, championing, so celebrating those achievements, and then advocating. And that's the part that is all around the equity and promoting equity through sport for all of society, not just for people with a disability. So I think you take that as a context, as a purpose of the organisation, and what it results in is what are now at least two quite clear propositions for any sponsors. And one is the ability to align with the high performance success of New Zealand at a Paralympic Games. So as a nation, we've got a pretty proud history of success at the Paralympic Games, and in recent times we were first for medals per capita in London 2012 and Rio 2016, and all of the athletes that go off to represent New Zealand are faced with some pretty stringent selection criteria that they have to meet first. So they're not there just to participate. They're all genuine medal chances or strong future prospects, and as a result, we frequently punch above our weight on that stage. So for a sponsor to align with that success is inherently attractive. But then the second part, which is perhaps the more ongoing part and the more exciting part in many ways, is that alignment with the Paralympic movement and everything that stands for. So essentially using parasport as a vehicle to challenge perceptions of disability, promote a more diverse and inclusive society. So we, in New Zealand, that kind of thinking was fairly new, and prior to building this program that we've got off the ground and quite successfully now, we didn't have any single means of communicating that to a potential sponsor. And what we did, and I can't take the credit for the creative genius behind this, but it came up with a program called the Spirit of Gold Initiative. And that's a platform that we align all of our commercial partnerships around. And it speaks to Spirit being that community connection, that alignment with the Paralympic movement, but also gold as a reference to our high performance credentials. So it boils it down quite cleanly and really opens people's eyes to what the opportunities are.
It sounds very attractive, as you said, trying to position all of that and focus it to make it attractive to sponsors. How has that translated? What does Paralympics New Zealand's sponsorship portfolio look like?
So we launched it in 2015, so a year out from the Rio Games, and progressively are building a pretty exciting, diverse portfolio that's, we still have a lot of ambition to grow, but it's on a positive trajectory, and we're proud of the great partners that we've managed to bring on board and retain. So the most recent of those is a new major partner, which is Toyota, and that's partly a product of a global relationship that Toyota reformed with the International Olympic Committee and International Paralympic Committee. But we're got some exciting stuff ahead over the next 7 or 8 years with Toyota in New Zealand as well. We've got our longest standing partner, who are Adecco, they're a global recruitment company, and there's a couple of really exciting bespoke initiatives that they're leading with us here in New Zealand around preparing athletes for work and employing people with disability. And then we have the three partners that actually really took that leap of faith and got the Spirit of Gold initiative off the ground. And that was the Accident Compensation Corporation, ACC, who are kind of like a public health insurer, if that makes sense. It's a system that's fairly unique to New Zealand, as I understand it, but they're all about encouraging Kiwis to have healthy, active lifestyles. And there's a clear relevance to people supporting the recovery of people that suffer a serious injury. And then we have Mondelez, better known as Cadbury, and also a company called Sanford, who are one of New Zealand's oldest, and they occupy a large part of New Zealand's seafood fishing quota. So quite an interesting business and quite different, and sponsorship isn't something they've really got behind, but our focus with them is a very solid foundation in the community and engaging what for them is quite a disparate workforce, with people away on fishing boats for long periods of time and having processing plants in isolated regions of New Zealand. So, yeah, quite a different portfolio. And then underneath that, we have a range, as all sporting organisations do, of suppliers. And, whilst their support is often more value in kind rather than real dollars, the importance of them shouldn't be underestimated, because it still makes a big difference to the bottom line. And we've actually spent a lot of time last year tidying that up and realigning it to ensure we're well resourced and well set up as we approach the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games.
And you're managing all of that. What's your relationship with the New Zealand Olympic Committee? Do you work at all on the sponsorship front with them, or are you 100% just doing things by yourself?
I guess the first point is that we are separate entities, so it's not always accurately understood. So the international structure, we have an International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee. They are completely separate, and I guess the way that flows through to us as a National Paralympic Committee means that we're our own, our own organisation with our own commercial program that there isn't any sort of crossover with. That said, we do work with the NZOC on a number of levels. So the Paralympic Games next week are taking place in many of the same venues, the exact same place as the Olympics did, and hence there's a lot of cross-sharing and learning between our operations teams and event managers, coaches and the like. And also on the commercial side, a big change recently has been bringing Toyota on, because at the same time they also took out the partnership with the New Zealand Olympic Committee. So that's the first time in recent history that we've got a major partner in common, and it's really added a whole new dimension, and we're really enjoying working together on that, because Toyota are committed to supporting us both to equal levels here in New Zealand, and trying to integrate the two in terms of their messaging and some of the activation that we'll hopefully see over the coming years. So, yeah, separate, but a good working relationship and lots of common links at all levels of our organisation.
You mentioned earlier the refocusing and the launch in 2015. In New Zealand, there's been a lot of positive commentary about the success of that program since its launch in 2015. What do you think's been the real key to that?
Daniel, I've got to give a quick shout out to our commercial and marketing director, Rachel Froggatt. So I think that's she's the brainchild behind the Spirit of Gold initiative, and that's the program that's really kind of captured that success and enabled it. The background being that in 2013 there was the Paralympics New Zealand board undertook a body of research or commissioned a body of research that revealed that we as an organisation would very well had high levels of awareness in New Zealand, but we weren't particularly well understood. And what that meant was that people would say, "Oh yeah, great, Paralympics New Zealand, that's cool," and then that was it. They weren't compelled to act. There wasn't engagement from donors, from people who might through events and fundraising activity, and there was certainly very limited engagement with the business community. So, coming up with the Spirit of Gold initiative, as I talked about before, was the work of Rachel and many of the other team that preceded me as well. But the ethos around that was about developing a stream of Paralympics New Zealand-led communications and content that communicates our story better and explains to everyone what we stand for. And where I come in is ensuring that translates through to our partners and that we really embrace them. So basically, I think a lot of, a common trap that a lot of not-for-profit sporting organisations fall into is you end up taking that revenue from your existing partners for granted. And whilst the commercial team will be very aware of it, the rest of the organisation may not. And a big part of our ethos and a big key to our success has been bringing the whole of PNZ on that journey. So, and a lot of cross-sharing of information, a lot of events that coaches and high-performance directors and similar are invited to and included in and exposed to our partners in the same way that we are, so that the importance of that commercial component is never misunderstood. And I think, secondly, we've been lucky to some extent, Daniel, with the partners that we have attracted. I mentioned before, but particularly ACC, Cadbury, Sanford, who took that leap of faith and backed a new program, something that wasn't proven and was purely a vision at the time. So for them to come on, and then the work that we've led with them over the last couple of years to be recognised by winning the commercial partnerships category at the 2017 Sport and Rec Awards. I think that's a pretty good marker to the success of it, and certainly helps us sort of in a testimonial capacity, at least as we go forward and attract new organisations on board as well.
I think that's a really interesting and valid point you make about some parts of the organisation may take existing revenue for granted, and it sounds as though you've had a bit of success in taking the wider organisation, not just the commercial team, on the journey with you. And sooner or later, you've mentioned those sponsors already, but retention is always a key driver for success. So once you've secured those sponsors, or you've helped shift their focus with the relaunch of the program, is there a specific philosophy you apply, or are there any key steps you make sure you go through to help ensure you do retain them?
Yes, there is, and in truth, this was the part of a topic I presented around at the Sports Sponsorship Summit here in Auckland last year, and it's a philosophy that I learnt in the UK with the work within the Club Wembley program and with IMG, and it was one of the main attractions for me when I interviewed for the Paralympics New Zealand role. I could see that the CEO and commercial director and the other people I interacted with were very aligned in their way of thinking as well. So for me, it's retention of clients in any capacity. Ultimately it boils down to ensuring that they see and they understand the value of their investment, but also they can see that future opportunity. You know, they want every organisation that invests wants to know that there's exciting things continuing to come and that there's a pathway forward and a clear plan for how that's going to be rolled out. So from my point of view, I focus it on 5 key practical aspects in terms of how I work with partners and what I seek to achieve. And the first of those is about explaining the product or service, making, don't take that assumption that the world that I work in is commonly understood by our partners. It's often not, and parasport and all the complexity of how we what our athletes do, how they compete, and their schedules, and what the opportunities for sponsors to align with it are, shouldn't be taken for granted. And even simple things about how do you talk to, and interact with people who have a disability, and what can I say, what can't I say? Those are all things that you can easily be barriers. So making sure that understanding is there and integrating your communication throughout so that people can pick that up and learn it. I try really hard to make it easy. Don't overcomplicate things. Keep it simple, and ensure that the key people at those organisations you build a really strong relationship with, and across the board as well. So, most brands will have a marketing team or a sponsorship manager or similar, but they're only often, in my eyes, only one component of that relationship. And yes, they're the gatekeeper and the intermediary, but if you're to grow a partnership, if you're to develop that relationship, you also need to constantly be on the eye out for other people from that organisation that you might meet or cross paths with, other opportunities where you see that that organisation doing something and can hit them up and suggest perhaps that they integrate their Paralympics relationship into that event, etc. Always trying to broaden the sort of the scope of the partnership. I think the fourth point was around guidance, helping, making it really obvious around what the opportunity is, how to do it, when to do it, what to do, but also being prepared to offer a stern word and perhaps a little bit of, kick up the backside, for want of a better expression, if you can see the warning bells and notice that the partnership isn't progressing as it should. If that partner or sponsor isn't utilising the rights and benefits that are available to them, then you can ignore it and keep quiet, or you can raise it as an issue right at the outset. And if you do that appropriately, then often they'll thank you for that as well, because it's never their intent. It's just the reality sometimes is that you need to continually breathe life into these things. And closely related to that is, and it's all part of the same ethos, but keeping, as a rights holder, keeping your organisation front of mind. So it's very rare on the sponsor's side for them to employ a person who's 100% focused on activating a particular single partnership. Often it's a function that sits within a marketing or an HR team, for instance, and they often have multiple rights holders and projects to work across. So for us, and for me personally in my role, I'm always chipping away at it, staying in contact, reminding them of Paralympics New Zealand, making sure that we're there and they're thinking about us, because otherwise it can drift, and if you do that for too long, it becomes hard to justify keeping those partners when that conversation comes around.
You explained that you, as an organisation, recognised that there wasn't huge engagement and understanding with Parasport and Paralympics New Zealand and the community. So within the refocus and the launch, what sort of activities or initiatives do you run to help engage and educate the community, and how do you involve sponsors in those?
So there's two. I mean, the Spirit of Gold initiative, the whole ethos is that it's a stream of activity that is Paralympics New Zealand led. So first and foremost, we want to make it easy for our sponsors to engage with us by providing them with ongoing opportunities that are really easy for them to activate. There's a number of examples, but things like marking the key milestones in the build-up to Paralympic Games, selection announcements, 100 days to go, that sort of thing. There's a couple that stand out that are unique to the Spirit of Gold initiative. One is a tour that we did in 2016 leading up to the Paralympic Games, and that was we commissioned a series of portraits of our most well-known Paralympians, and in recognition of the fact that they weren't going to be around because they were busy training and they couldn't take time time out of their immediate preparations prior to Rio, we had these portraits of them painted and instead took those around the country. And we did a series of events with the local Chamber of Commerces and a number of towns around New Zealand. And in the end, stopped at 105 locations, and our partners directly hosted those portraits, and we were able to facilitate the occasional athlete appearance and so forth to go along with those. As a way of promoting awareness and engaging local communities in the Paralympic Games and building that sort of base level of understanding. So that was hugely successful. We did it on a shoestring, but it started off with a backbone of events that we designed, and then we worked with each of our partners to build bespoke programs and opportunities for them off the back of it. And like I say, 105 visits over 6 months really was unprecedented for us in New Zealand, and it did a huge amount to change how we were understood and perceived in the community. And then I guess the second part of your question around involving sponsors, the other obvious way is that we build bespoke programs for them. So the best example of that is our partnership with ACC. I mentioned earlier that it's about encouraging participation in sport, encouraging Kiwis of all descriptions to live healthy, active lifestyles. And we've had a very successful program called the ACC Paralympics New Zealand Open Days, which bring together on a regional level local sport providers and along with our Paralympians and medalists, etc., we showcase parasport in that community and encourage the public to come along and learn about the opportunities that are available to them, and hopefully leave motivated to take that first step and get into sport. So, for us, that ticks a huge box of growing the base and growing our community understanding and presence. For ACC, it's very much aligned to their objectives as well. So that's been probably the most successful example of a partner-led activity that is bespoke, but there's a whole heap of untapped potential that we see with our existing partners and any new organisations that are looking to do similar things.
You mentioned about the activation around the portraits, and that was in the past. With the team heading off soon, what sorts of sponsor activations and engagements have you recently run, or I know we're getting close and people are flying out in the next couple of days, or you will run in the lead up?
Well, the first point is that the team have already gone. They're long gone, actually. They mostly left New Zealand in November because they need to train in the Northern Hemisphere winter leading up to the Winter Paralympics. So we farewelled them in early November with a large send-off event at Government House in Auckland, which was hosted by New Zealand's Governor-General, and again was a great opportunity for PNZ to lead something that all of our partners, stakeholders, people that have made significant contributions to those winter campaigns were invited to. And around that opportunity, because we had all the athletes in one place for a day or two, we were able to do a lot of filming with those athletes, and that content has all been made available to our partners as well for them to develop into internal and social media video and digital campaigns and content that hopefully we'll see a bit of publicly, but certainly a lot of internally from their side over the next couple of weeks. New for us with Toyota on board, they've taken out a broadcast sponsorship as well. So they've partnered with TVNZ to make the free-to-air broadcast back into New Zealand possible. And that's huge because it means that all Kiwis will get the chance to interact with the games and watch it on free-to-air television, which has a far greater reach than the paid broadcaster does, obviously. And it's also Toyota's first true sort of public engagement where they'll be showcasing their support of Paralympic sport and us as an organisation. So that's pretty exciting. ACC have got a couple more of these open days planned, so late March in Tauranga and then down in the South Island of New Zealand in Dunedin in early April. So they coincide just a couple of days after the team return, and it will be the first chance for the New Zealand public to hopefully meet a couple of our Pyeongchang 2018 medalists, if I don't jinx things by saying that. And then, all our other partners, so Cadbury, Sanford, Adecco, have a variety of initiatives. Truthfully, a lot of that is a little bit more internal and stakeholder focused rather than the kind of above the line external facing activations that perhaps some of them did around Rio. I think that's a reflection on the probably the New Zealand public sentiment in terms of engagement with the Winter Paralympic Games. It's the middle of summer here, and people aren't, they're in tune to it now because the Olympics have just concluded, and that was a very successful Games for New Zealand. But a month ago, half the country wouldn't have known it was on. So it has been a slightly slower build-up, but I think we'll see some pretty exciting stuff now that it's almost upon us.
Most developed sponsorship markets are crowded, and New Zealand is definitely no different. You've got, I'm not even sure this is a strong enough phrase, but a rugby union mad market. They're absolutely crazy about rugby union. Netball's obviously very strong. You've got a new nationally focused competition there, so that's putting pressure on the sponsorship market. You've got the long-established New Zealand Warriors in the rugby league, and you've obviously got cricket, and you've got a plethora of other sports like most developed countries do. How do you go about setting yourself apart, and where do you focus in terms of attracting sponsors? Because you don't just go back to the same well that everybody else does, those major high-profile sports with, the pay TV stations in Sky or Vodafone or NZME. How do you set yourself apart?
Yeah, it's interesting because I agree with everything you just said. It's absolutely a crowded market, and there's a never-ending or growing number of sporting organisations that aspire to achieve the same commercial success as fortunately, touch wood, we have in recent times. So I think it is challenging. The other part to it is that we're an entirely different proposition altogether. I mean, perhaps not dissimilar to the Olympic Committee in this regard, but we've got, in contrast to your typical sporting organisation, rugby or netball, Warriors, like you just mentioned, we've got no tickets or hospitality to sell. We don't have naming rights to a venue that we can make available to a sponsor. There's no perimeter advertising, obviously. The international rules around the Paralympic Games prevent us from carrying any sponsor commercial logos onto uniform. To give that exposure, organic exposure that comes through a broadcast or media coverage of a game. So it's a pretty different proposition right from the outset. And in truth, Daniel, that actually opens quite a lot of doors for us because it means that straight away we're not just talking about the same things that brands have been presented before. And what we really do is focus on what makes us unique. And for us, that's our first and foremost, it's our athletes and their stories, which are often, in many ways, and this isn't a sob story by any stretch, but the hardship and the challenges that many Paralympians overcome just to get to that elite level and to get through their day-to-day lives in some cases, that is such a powerful story that it often supersedes some of their athletic achievement as well. And if you're lucky enough to have a whole host of role models as we do that have got a very powerful emotive story behind them, plus they're one of the best in the world at their chosen discipline, then that's pretty powerful. And the second thing is that real focus on the power of the Paralympic movement, which is again unique to us as a National Paralympic Committee. So that diversity and social inclusion, they're pretty hot topics in the corporate landscape of New Zealand at the moment. There's a lot of talk about it in the media and politics in terms of companies trying to come up with strategies that make them more attractive to a changing labour market and making them be seen to do the best thing as well. So we get quite a bit of traction at the moment with current and potential sponsors who are looking for ways to tangibly implement policies or directives aimed at making them more inclusive, more diverse, more aligned with a changing New Zealand, essentially. So, so I guess those two things are where we stand apart. But it's interesting because we don't really compare ourselves to a lot of the more traditional sports in many ways, anyway.
Yeah, it's a really interesting comment you made there. When I thought about the question, I wasn't really sure where you might go with the answer. And as you rightly explained, you don't have hospitality and tickets and things like that you can sell. So you're forced to move away from what would probably be coined or classed as, your stock standard benefits that you can offer sponsors. And I think I'm making this comment more for the listeners rather than for your validation, Ian. But I think if a lot of, for want of a better phrase, tier one or traditional or really high profile sports sat down in their offices, got the post-it notes out, got the whiteboard happening and said, if we stripped away all those traditional tickets, hospitality logos, where would we focus? Because yes, they have a place, but those things that you have to focus on create such an emotional connection with the sponsor, and that has really powerful implications for the activation and the success of the sponsorship. So great answer, really insightful. In that answer, you alluded to, you can't have logos on uniforms because of the restrictions that are in place. And most of us working in the industry have heard the stories about the strict sponsorship guidelines that the IOC puts in place and the industry has to work in. And often those stories are from a brand's perspective about what brands can and can't do so much. You're obviously governed by the International Paralympic Committee. Are they still really tight like that? What can you tell us about them from your side of the fence? Yeah,
they are. There's actually part of it is a very, I was going to say complicated, but it's not really when you boil it down. But it's not very well understood. But there's a marketing accord between the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee, and what that means is that any sponsors that exist at a global level with the International Olympic Committee or the International Paralympic Committee are brands and sponsor categories, I guess, partner categories that we also need to protect. So, I guess a good example of that is Coca-Cola, say. So they're an International Olympic Committee partner, meaning that as a National Paralympic Committee who's governed by the International Paralympic Committee, we are also unable to engage a prospective partner in that category. So we couldn't, for instance, without an exception being granted, which would, I think, be pretty unlikely in this, given sort of Coca-Cola's penetration globally, we're unable to partner with the likes of Pepsi or Powerade or any kind of drinks brand, anything that falls into the definition of Coca-Cola's partnership with the IOC. So that was a quirk that I sort of struggled with from this side of the fence initially, because we as a National Paralympic Committee don't receive any compensation for that. It's just a category that's blocked, and hence we have to sort of map all those out and then spot the gaps. And the good side is that there is plenty of gaps still. And when you look at it and the reasons for that, I think overall it's a pretty logical and fair system. The good side, the upside for us is that it's the same system that actually protects our partners, and domestically in New Zealand at least ensures that they're the only organisations that get to promote their support of us as an NPC or the New Zealand Paralympic Games team during a Paralympic Games. So they have you may be familiar, I'm sure many of the listeners are familiar with the blackout period that exists immediately either side of an Olympic and during an Olympic or Paralympic Games. And it's that sort of framework that all ties things together and prevents any personal partners of athletes or organisations that don't have any association with the Paralympic Games from celebrating those achievements or claiming an association to it. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. The good news, I think, is that there's a growing kind of willingness from the corporate sector to support the Paralympic sport as much as Olympic sport. And I mentioned earlier, but the Toyota deal is the first global one that does that. So, in contrast to the Coca-Cola example, that actually includes a direct contribution to all the national Paralympic committees around the world, and that's the beginning or the basis for the relationship we've built with Toyota New Zealand as well.
One of the great things about a Games is that it thrusts athletes into the spotlight, and especially in a home country when a lot of the time the majority of them don't mostly enjoy much of a profile. There's only a small amount of Olympic and Paralympic athletes that enjoy high profiles sort of month in, month out, year in, year out and in between games. But it isn't like the weekend grind of a team sport or competition where engagement is sustained for, I don't know, anywhere between 15 to 25 weeks. Does that affect your sponsorship attraction and management at all?
Yeah, it does, Daniel. To be honest, absolutely. It's one of our biggest challenges we have to overcome in conversation with any existing or potential sponsor. I think that that peak and trough kind of mentality of a games being every 4 years. It's closely aligned to what we spoke about a few moments ago, and the fact that for us, our answer to that is to develop a program of content that, namely the Spirit of Gold initiative, that isn't directly associated with competition and high performance, and isn't focused on those key pinnacle events all the time, but is about our ongoing values and ways that we can contribute to an organisation, the things we can control. So, in reality, if you organise a bespoke event with a Paralympian who speaks to your staff, who turns up to have a photo and gives everyone the chance to wear a Paralympic gold medal, and you hear their story and you improve your staff engagement tenfold, then that can be just as inspirational 2 years out from or 3 years out from a Paralympic Games as it can be immediately afterwards. And that's, I guess, the kind of the answer. But ultimately, I'd be making it sound a little bit too rosy if I didn't admit that was still a significant challenge for us.
And I think it links back to that point that that's what you need to focus on, and what you do focus on successfully, rather than those sports or competitions that do have long engagement periods, because traditionally they focus on the branding, the advertising, the ticketing, the hospitality. So I think that's probably maybe byproduct is the wrong phrase, but it is definitely something that you focus on, and as I said, focus on well, and it obviously attracts people to the stories and creates that emotional attraction.
I agree, and it's everyone has an off season, right? So I'm sure that any football club or rugby club, whatever, would face with the same challenge. We were faced with it at Wembley at the end of a football season, when there was if we didn't have a strong concert calendar for the summer, then we were asked the same questions about, hang on, it's 3 or 4 months to our next event. So it's a slightly longer period and perhaps a bigger scale of a challenge for us here. But like you say, you focus on the bits you can control, and actually when you dive into it, it's those parts that can really add the value to the opportunity as well.
Here. What are some of the common challenges you have in managing or guiding the individual athletes who go out and look to attract their own sponsorships, in terms of either the challenge that you have either helping them or educating them, or even just trying to make sure that it aligns well with Paralympics New Zealand?
I think probably the biggest challenge for a lot of our Paralympic athletes is they don't really know their own value, and perhaps how to communicate that. So there's not a lot of precedent for them having attracted personal partners. I mean, there's a handful in New Zealand, many quite well-known names who have, and they've done that successfully. I mean, I guess globally everyone knows Sophie Pascoe and Liam Malone more recently. But underneath that, a lot of the athletes are still very new to that commercial opportunity, and I think that there's a challenge there around ensuring the athletes are getting a fair deal, but also ultimately we have to be true to what our core purpose is, and as much as we want our athletes to do well individually, it's our responsibility to prepare and adequately resource teams to the Paralympic Games, and hence we need that investment to be coming directly into Paralympics New Zealand, and ensuring that there's the coaches, the structures, the all the support network that goes with it, so that those athletes have the best possible chance of success when they come to compete. So I think it's probably an ongoing challenge there around balancing that protection and making ourselves attractive to PNZ sponsors, with that desire to get the best for each individual athlete and help them progress as well. There's I don't know, a couple of examples. Do you want me to share a quick example on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
There's one good and one bad that I thought of, because it's probably not a word that's all that obvious to everyone all the time. But great example. So Sophie Pascoe, New Zealand's most successful Paralympian, and she has got quite a well-established personal brand that a number of organisations get behind. Last year, a very high profile in New Zealand example, one that I had a keen eye for given my previous work experience, was Rebel Sport, and a campaign that an ongoing campaign they're running around What's Your Why? And they sort of profile a number of ambassadors, successful sports people in New Zealand, and really explore what motivates them. So Rebel Sport are a personal partner of Sophie. They make no direct contribution to us, but in the spirit of helping Sophie, and also with an acknowledgement that all publicity is good and awareness is good, particularly in a non-games year, we work very closely with Rebel Sport and their creative agencies to work through all the necessary IP protection and approvals process for their commercial that they ran on TV and online here in New Zealand. So in the end product didn't actually carry any of Paralympics New Zealand IP. It didn't conflict at all with the rights and benefits that we grant the organisations that sponsor and partner with us. But it worked for Sophie, and it also, for the general public, for all intents and purposes, it was a great showcase of Paralympic sport and the story behind those athletes. So that's an example where an athlete who has the right sort of management around them and the right kind of advice and guidance, and who are, an organisation that's willing to engage, can make it work really well. On the flip side of the coin, then we had an example recently with an organisation that approached us wanting to secure the services of an athlete, a para-athlete, to help them launch a new product. And all they were prepared to do was offer a very, what we felt was pretty embarrassing small figure sum considering who they were, to the individual athlete. And their attitude was that they were doing us a favour and doing the athlete a favour by giving them a profile.
Wow.
So, that was kind of the other side of the coin, and we do, I guess, increasingly as the awareness and potential within parasport sort of, becomes more readily understood, we increasingly get those types of inquiries as well. And ultimately, that's the athlete's decision. And fortunately, from our point of view in this case, the athlete turned that one down. But there's still some people that take that view of it.
Mm. A good friend of Sponserve and a keen listener of the podcast is Vicky Saunders from the Sponsorship Consultants, and I was talking to her the other day, mentioned that...
Oh dear.
She's got a tough question for you. So I mentioned you were going to be on the show. She said, can I ask him a question? I said, absolutely. Her question is, do you think there is a way that a large organisation such as Paralympics New Zealand can set up a program that gives individual athletes experience and skills in giving back to sponsors in a way that makes them more attractive to the individual sponsors, kind of like a work experience, so that they get to develop the skills of a sponsored athlete?
I need to be careful with my answer here, Daniel, don't I?
Vicky's listening.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, absolutely. Of course there is. And I think as long as an organisation we had the right resources available to adequately and appropriately support that, and we were able to engage the right network of stakeholders as well. And in New Zealand, the sporting system is such that we're not the only entity that's responsible for achieving the success of our Paralympic athletes at the Games. We're fortunate to have High Performance Sport New Zealand, who we work very closely with, and a whole network of service providers, sports psychologists, nutrition, physios, etc., who help our athletes day to day, week to week with their training schedules. And there's actually a team who we already work with in that department around a specific initiative with a DECO called the Athlete Career Program. And that's designed to help athletes develop the skills and resources, CVs, etc., that are necessary for them to adequately transition from an athletic career into a professional career, to get a job once they finish competing, or perhaps during if they're part time or taking a bit of a break for a period. So I think that's a good precedent. And to Vicky, yes, absolutely. If we could find the right way to do it, then I think that'd be an awesome thing to be able to do for our athletes.
Probably not so much in recent games, but in many games gone past, social media hasn't played a major role. And so events like the Paralympics have struggled for the public's attention and probably contributed to what your research found about a lack of engagement and understanding on the public's part about parasport. social media gives everyone a boost. But can you walk us through what your general approach to social media and sponsorship is?
Yeah, I can, and it's something we're learning and evolving all the time as well, Daniel, because it's changing so quickly, and it's incredibly hard to get that cut through on a consistent basis. Our philosophy and our overarching sort of approach to it is to ensure we're providing our partners with as much content as possible, and really have their interests in mind as well when we're negotiating access to particular events, competitions, the image rights from them, for instance. So our athletes, albeit there's a Paralympic Games summer and winter every 2 years, in between times they're frequently heading off to World Championships, World Cup events, international competition, and there's a hell of a lot of really strong content within that that is just completely untapped, and our partners are frequently provided with updates and opportunities and sent a schedule well in advance that maps out when those events are occurring and when there might be opportunities for them to leverage that. So a lot of that does translate into social media. Obviously you can achieve a lot with a very minimal budget, and partners are able to create a bit of exclusivity for themselves by being the only organisations who get that insight from us, at least. I mentioned earlier we did the athletes filming before the team left New Zealand, so that with an acknowledgement to the fact that it was going to be hard to access athletes during the Paralympic Games, and in the months prior, we, mid last year, started talking to partners about what their plans were for Pyeongchang and how they were going to activate that on social media and internally, and develop this sort of content generation session for them that we did in November before the team departed. So I think that socially, it is obviously all about that genuine content. There's a lot there, and I don't think we've really we probably haven't done with our partners. We probably haven't done a lot more than scratch the surface. It was a really good example where Sanford, aligned with their operation as a seafood company, ran a trivia competition on their social media account, profiling a number of the Paralympians during Rio, and then offering the prize of coming along to a seafood school cooking class, which is one of their core products that they offer to the public here in New Zealand, and learning to cook alongside a Paralympian. So that was a kind of a nice link that sort of tied all those things together. And Mondelez Cadbury did a similar engagement that was very successful, where they encouraged New Zealanders to leave messages of support for the Paralympic team through their social media channels, through a bespoke website that they built, and then actually collated those and printed them into hard copy books that they presented to the athletes before they departed for Rio. So, yeah, we've certainly seen some good ones, but it's a challenging space, right? Everyone's looking to achieve similar things, as you say, with your question around, it gives everyone a boost, but it can also be a challenging landscape to build real value into sometimes.
So we've spoken a fair bit about the Winter Paralympics because it's front and centre of our mind and attention right now. But what about the parasports program at the Gold Coast 2018 Commonwealth Games, kicking off less than a month after the Winter Paralympics? How hectic is this period for you? Is it a bit stressful, or is it just awesome? An awesome time to have the athletes in the spotlight for an extended period. I mean, how do you even have time for this interview, Ian?
As soon as you ask, Daniel, I think I'll have a few people wondering where I've been for the last hour or so when I get back to my emails in a moment. But no, look, truthfully, we actually don't deliver the Commonwealth Games campaign in New Zealand. So I don't know how this compares globally, but the structure is that there's a Commonwealth Games Federation, which is actually, for all intensive purposes, the New Zealand Olympic Committee. And the Commonwealth Games differ slightly in that they're fully integrated. So para-athletes compete alongside able-bodied athletes in the sense that the events are run during the same period in the same venues, not 2 weeks after, as is the case with the Paralympic Games. So we selected and nominated some of our athletes, nominated, and some of those athletes were subsequently selected to the New Zealand Commonwealth Games team, and it's going to be awesome to have them in the spotlight for that extended period like you talk about. And obviously it's a summer event, so it's a different group of athletes, and it's not every day that they get that kind of media coverage and so forth. So yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting. It is busy for us, and we'll be supporting it, supporting their results, and advocating for New Zealand to get behind them. It's going to be interesting to see. I think having the games just across the ditch on the Gold Coast there will be pretty awesome for the New Zealand public as well.
Ian, amazing athletes, and we really do look forward to following the New Zealand team and cheering for them in South Korea. Fingers crossed for 2 medals, maybe even 1 more. Great chat. And if people want to get in touch with you or find out more about Paralympics New Zealand, what can they do?
Yeah, contact me by email, which is Sargeant, Sargeant, @paralympics.org.nz, or look me up on LinkedIn. I try and pride myself on responding to all messages and all emails, and as you've probably gathered from the length of some of my answers, I do like a chat. So get in touch.
Very good. And with all good podcasts, we'll have links to Ian's LinkedIn profile and his email in the show notes. Ian Sargeant, Commercial Partnerships Manager, thank you so much for taking us inside Paralympics New Zealand.
Thanks, Daniel. Absolute pleasure. Cheers.
Yes, I'm sure that when faced with challenging circumstances, we all like to think that we'd come up with a great approach. Maybe, maybe not. But why do we have to wait? How much untapped or missed opportunity lies in your organisation because you haven't worked through some tough hypotheticals like, what if we didn't have X inventory? Or what if our annual calendar looked different? I think it would be a worthwhile exercise for a lot of rights holders. So thanks again to Ian. Great chat. Really enjoyed it. And a reminder that you can find links to Paralympics New Zealand and Ian's LinkedIn profile and his email address in the show notes at sponserve.net. Thanks again for tuning into the show. Like I said in the opening, if you'd like a shout out, then be sure to get in contact. We love getting little messages from you just saying hi. If you want to connect with me, you can do so on LinkedIn. Just search for Daniel Oyston or drop me an email at daniel@sponserve.net or on Twitter using the handle @sponserve. And if you want to connect with our MD, Mark Thompson, you can email him on mark@sponserve.net or find him also on LinkedIn. Don't forget that you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram. Just search for Sponserve. Until next time, I'm Daniel Oyston. Thanks for listening to Inside Sponsorship.
Thanks for listening to the show. For more episodes, blogs and resources, head to sponserve.net or search for Sponserve on Facebook, Twitter or LinkedIn.